Beresford is with the Columbia Institute for Progressive Governance, and they do a lot of support work, resource for civic leaders, municipal, school boards, and others in terms of policy and analysis support for progressive initiatives. And they've been an important partner for this forum. We're a sponsoring partner last year and are back again. And she's going to talk about support for municipalities in terms of energy retrofits. So Charlie Beresford from BC now, right?
I'd actually like to introduce our Saskatchewan coordinator for our Centre for Civic Governance work, Tracy Mitchell. And I want to thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to come and speak with you all today. I had the good fortune of attending the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Sustainability Conference in Ottawa this past week, and we were pleased to be asked to come and speak about our research that I'm going to be talking about with you today. We were on an NRCan panel, because the idea that we're going to be talking about with you today is a really kind of interesting possibility for municipal leaders who might want to take some strong action for their community. Will help with greenhouse gas emissions, will help with creating jobs, making things much more comfortable. Now there's a little advocacy required in order to get to that, but I'll be talking about that as we go along. So let's just start a little bit with the context. And is this the right clicker? Does this work? I wanted to talk a little bit about the context of Canada and climate change. This is going to be a familiar topic for all of you here, but I find it's kind of useful to talk a little bit about the numbers because it's a useful way of framing things. And I guess I'd like to preface it by saying I had the good fortune of being able to go to Copenhagen for the international discussions on climate action a couple of years ago, when it looked like we might be able to tip the international leadership in a stronger way. You're probably familiar with the stat already. The United Nations has a panel of scientists called the IPCC. And in their last report, the fourth assessment report it's called, they made some recommendations for how deeply developed nations need to drop their greenhouse gas emissions. And this is the report that was in the news a lot because it made that tie between human activity and production of greenhouse gases and climate change. And what they said is that developed nations need to drop their emissions 25 to 40% below 1990 levels by 2020. So here it is, we're just into 2012, that's 8 years from now. It's not very far away. They also said in that report that the world globally needs to peak greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2015 and then become a downhill slide. Well, that's only 3 years away. So we're getting awfully close to midnight here. That's the emissions peak point. And Canada's role, as you know, has been a little bit disappointing in all of this. So Canada's goals, we did sign on to Kyoto, and we said that we would be 6% below 1990 levels. Well, we're not. We're actually 17% above right now. If you were to add that 17% above to the 25 to 40% that we need to be dropped by 2020, it gets into some astounding numbers of how much over target we are. And just to put it in perspective, we are among the top 10 nations in the world for the absolute volume of greenhouse gases that we emit. So it would be kind of useful to know a little bit about something that will help us take action. And here's what it is. Here's a glimmer of hope. It turns out that retrofitting and buildings are both a source of greenhouse gas emissions, but also conservation is a source for dropping them really steeply. And in fact, the IPCC, the same group I was telling you about, talks about the largest portion of carbon savings by 2030 is in retrofitting existing buildings. There's a lot of new building going on, and there's lots that can be done about building code and innovative design, but there's a lot of old buildings around, and so there's some real scope by taking action on the old buildings. And here's another one that'll put it into perspective for you around the cost factor, the kind of the absolute bottom line. Chief scientist of the Rocky Mountain Institute, this is a quote from them, "Saving electricity needs about 1,000 times less capital and repays it about 10 times faster than supplying more electricity." So it's a really good business case. And I was, in fact, just talking to someone who was very excited about the development of something called Efficiency Nova Scotia. And Efficiency Nova Scotia was arrived because the provincially owned electricity generating company has a rule. And the rule is that they will provide electricity at the least expensive way to do it. And they did a business case, and they found out that it was way less expensive to conserve than it was to build another coal-fired plant. And so it gave rise to Efficiency Nova Scotia. And Efficiency Nova Scotia is funded by a surcharge on people's energy bills. A certain percentage of it goes into Efficiency Nova Scotia, which is an independent organization and which is very active on conservation and on retrofits. So energy efficiency retrofits, we've been talking largely in the environment context, but there's a lot of advantage for the homeowner too. And the advantages for the homeowner include comfort, maybe being able to afford a slightly more comfortable house if your energy isn't quite so expensive. And also including much lower energy bills. There's a lot of benefits for community in an active retrofit aspect as well. And some of those, environment we've talked about, homeowner we've talked about, community, I'm going to go into a bit more detail. Let me talk a little bit about cutting the emissions. So we did a little bit of look around across Canada and looked at some of the material from the States to see if we could find a number. And if we were to go into an ambitious retrofit program, we could expect cutting emissions in the building sector by 27%. GHG reductions in the neighborhood of 19 megatons of CO2 per year. And a little bit of the retrofit reduces the average home energy use by, a little over 25%. Depends a little bit on how it's done and what the climatic conditions are in the particular country, or country. I guess you could call Saskatchewan a country. And here's a few stats for the average homeowner. Saves about $700 a year on a $2,000 annual heating bill. That's pretty substantive savings. Recovers on sale of the house usually about 61% of the upgrade when the house is sold. And again, that comfort point finds it easier and costs less to have a comfortable temperature. Here's another community benefit, job creation. This is a really interesting one. 20 jobs for every $1 million in retrofitting expenditure versus $4 million to create a single job in the oil patch. So it's an interesting kind of combination. $4 million has to be spent for one job in the oil patch, whereas you can get 20 jobs for every $1 million for retrofitting. So if you multiply 20 by 4, you get 80 jobs to one. It's kind of an interesting comparison. And we must have done the calculations differently from a different stat because we've got 52 to 64 jobs in our analysis. The other thing about these jobs, and this is a source is the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternative Study, is that not only are there more jobs, but they're actually greener jobs. This particular slide here is the greenhouse gas emissions that are produced per job on the oil patch. So you can see that the long red line there is the tons of CO2 equivalent in the oil and gas industry per job compared to a job in retrofitting. It's significant. The other really interesting thing about retrofit programs is they offer an opportunity for some other community benefits. We're calling them social justice for lack of a better phrase. It's a good one. And that's for working with people who might be underemployed in your community already. And here's a Canadian example, Warm Up Winnipeg. And Warm Up Winnipeg has an organization called BUILD, which was established by the Aboriginal community stakeholders. And guess I should back up by saying that in Manitoba, Manitoba Hydro has a very active retrofit program. They've given out something like 41,000 loans to see retrofits happen around the province, and there are innovative agencies picking up and running with that. Warm Up Winnipeg, through BUILD, retrofits private and public housing, and they focus a lot on low income and social housing. And they drop the energy costs for the households. They train underemployed people. And they have a really good track record of moving employees from welfare to work in family supporting jobs. So they're jobs that pay well enough to be able to support families as well. I wanted to pause for a moment to look at what kind of infrastructure is there across Canada to support the retrofit initiatives. And there are provincial grants and initiatives, and they vary from province to province. And I noticed there's a couple in Saskatchewan. We've got, for example, something called the Energy Star Loan Program. Is anyone here familiar with that from Sask Energy? Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about it, then I don't have to tell everyone? Go ahead.
No, not personally, just of the program.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm from Sask Power,
Yeah.
and we partner with Sask Energy, the gas utility in the province.
Yeah.
And the Energy Star Loan Program is a low interest rate loan for homeowners to replace their old furnaces with high efficiency furnace with variable speed fan motors.
Okay. Do you know anything about the geothermal and self-generated renewable power loan program?
Yes, a little bit about that, yes.
Can you tell us about that too?
Again, that program is for residential geothermal, which is basically a ground source heat pump type of installation, or a solar PV installation, or a wind turbine installation for residential customers. It's a low interest rate loan, and the funding agent is TD Financial Services, who provides the loan funding for, and the low interest rate loan portion of it to buy down that interest rate is provided by Sask Power. So as an example, for a system that you're looking at to install, either geothermal, wind, or solar, the buy down or rate amount is about 10% of that total cost.
Okay, well thank you. So a really fine example of what the some of the provincial initiatives across the country and what's unique about Saskatchewan. We did have federal eco energy grants. Those have been canceled, and that announcement was made just a couple of weeks ago. We do still have federal NRCan standards and an energy auditor program. So if you're going to be launching any kind of active retrofit program, it's really important to have access to energy auditors, and consistent standards are really helpful as well. So what are the barriers to retrofitting? Well, sometimes there isn't enough of a grant available, so it's hard for people to find that $7,000 to $10,000 that they need up front in order to capitalize their retrofits. And again, sometimes it's the length of home ownership. So sometimes they go, well, I don't know if it's worth my while to really spend time on this because I'm going to be selling the house or moving on anyway. And maybe they're just not aware of what the possibilities are and kind of how important it might be, how much more comfortable and how much money they could save by doing it. And the third point here is expensive private financing. So if you don't have enough money in your pocket and you have to borrow it, it can be from a bank, it can be very expensive. So here comes the new idea. So retrofitting is a good idea, but there are some possible barriers. So what's the new idea? I had a little fun playing with this. And I want to tell you the story of Babylon, New York. So we heard about Babylon, New York by going to a conference. It was called Good Jobs, Green Jobs in Washington, D.C. And attending Babylon, New York was the mayor of Babylon. And he was talking about how in his town they had done an analysis of where the greenhouse gas emissions were coming from. And 35% of them were coming from residential housing, 25% of them were coming from commercial buildings. So they decided that they needed to have some kind of active initiative if they were going to do their part in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And they decided that they would do an active retrofit program because it was 35% of their greenhouse gas emissions were coming from residential housing. Now, they're very creative kind of people. And they happen to have in their town a solid waste facility. And to support the solid waste facility, they were required to have a capital fund to cap the ash, solid waste ash capping fund, had a lot of money in it. And so what they did was they decided that perhaps CO2 could be classified as a solid waste. And that's what they did. And so with that creativity, they were able to access about $2 million from that fund to be a kind of a revolving loan fund to set up their retrofit program. And if you go onto their website right now and it says the question, is this a loan? They say, no, it's not a loan. This is action on solid waste. And so to be able to participate in the program, I know, Saul, who said? Everyone says it's waste, but they did it, so I think that's the point. So to be a part of the program, there's an application process. So if you're a homeowner, you make an application. Applications are accepted once they do an analysis because they really want the program to succeed. So they pick applications where there's going to be enough of a payoff for the homeowner to pay back their loan, actually their solid waste fund, replenish the solid waste fund, with maybe slightly less, smaller payments than they have been making already for their energy costs. So there's an application process. The town there's no NRCan program there, no Canada Wine program, so the town actually has its own ability to license auditors and contractors, and so that's the next step. And they come in and they do the work, and there's an audit that makes sure that the work has been completed. And then the homeowner pays the solid waste fund back through their property tax bills. And their average rate of payback is just over 8.5 years. They save about $1,000 a year. They're paying about $1,000 a year less on their energy bills than they were before. And so they had a pretty interesting outcome. Here we are. And here's just basically the outline of the program. $1,000 a year, savings payback on the loan. Average pay gap 8.77 years, paid through the municipal services bill. Based on projected savings, if the homeowners default, Babylon can add assessment to their property taxes. It's called a special assessment benefit. Very safe for the town. They're not going to have default because they've got this capability. And they also charge an administration fee of 3% because there's some program costs involved in having staff and so on to provide the infrastructure. So basically, they've got this program that pays for itself, that provides low-cost money to homeowners to be able to get the work done in a kind of a one-stop shop. There's the application process, and that's how they apply. So, 3 years, because these are from stats from 2011. Since 2008, in a population of 211,000, they've done 638 retrofits. So that's 1% of their building stock already. It's a huge proportion. And the town is really, really proud. They feel like that's part of their identity, that they've been able to show in this innovative way such take-up for a program that provides so much more comfort to their homeowners, and which they are proud to say, and they say on their website, helps to reduce their country's dependency on oil. So that's one of the things that they think is a benefit for it. So we wondered, can it work in Canada? And we did put together a paper. Can you hold one up, Tracy? Yeah. It's called This Greenhouse. And if you'd like to know how to download it, we'll give you a card. We've got some copies here. And we looked at the research that's already been done across the country on this idea. And essentially in Canada, there are two mechanisms that might work to be able to provide this kind of an approach: local improvement charges and on-bill financing through utilities. And both the Pembina Institute and the Suzuki Foundation have done a fair amount of research on this. There's been a paper that's been done through CMHC that actually makes a recommendation for the federal government establishing a pool of low-cost financing for municipalities to implement. And it's the same kind of structure as we described in Babylon. Municipalities providing low-cost funds for home improvement, owners repaying over time as a special assessment on their property taxes. And the key thing about this idea is attaching the assessment to the property rather than to the homeowner, because it doesn't add to the individual debt load if it's attached to the property. And the idea is that if the person sells the property when it's halfway through, the new owner just picks up those payments, and then of course they disappear as the loan is discharged. And of course the safety issue for the municipalities is that it's secured with a lien. So municipalities don't have a big worry. And I should just say that the experience of Manitoba Hydro in providing these loans on defaults was very, very positive. The default rate for the 41,000 loans that Manitoba Hydro has done is lower than the default rate of an ordinary bank loan. So it's a pretty good stat. The other thing that's really important about this is that program participation does not affect the property taxes of non-participants. It doesn't mean more taxes. It means it is a local improvement charge is. Does everybody know what a local improvement charge is? I didn't till I started looking into this. A local improvement charge is often what's happened if your town puts in a sidewalk or maybe paves the streets. And it's sort of a special benefit that's assessed in order to pay for that improvement. And the key around using local improvement charges as a mechanism for retrofits is really having a look at the definition of local improvement charges. That's the basic mechanism that could be tapped to go into this kind of an arrangement. On utility bill financing is a similar kind of thing, and in Saskatchewan here where you have Sask Power, that might be something that Sask Power might want to consider. Same thing, the utility would provide some low-cost money to the homeowner and then have the homeowner pay back on their bills. And that's essentially what those 2 points are. So, generally, what's needed across Canada? Well, some clarification about what you can do with those local improvement charges. So, explicit approval, generally, across each province is what's required, or on-bill financing legislation. British Columbia has just passed on-bill financing legislation, and I know that they're expecting some big take-up in about a year and a half's time. They're doing the regulations right now. And we have a really fine example in the small town of Nelson, British Columbia, where they're developing that model already. They're going to be providing low-income loans to the people in Nelson who will be paying back on their utility bills. Nelson happens to own their own utility, and that's why they're able to do it. And it's a, sort of a leading-edge story here in Canada for that kind of way of doing things. And here's just a little bar graph to tell you a little bit about what the advantages are for the homeowner. So the blue bar is utility expenses, the red one is financing payments, and the green one are client savings. So the long bar at the end, that's how much the utility expenses would be before the retrofit. The middle one would be the balance between utility expenses and financing payments while you're paying off the loan. And you can see you can construct it so there's a little green on the top, so it might be slightly less, so it makes it more attractive to homeowners. And then the other bar is utility expenses in blue, and then client savings. You can see the client savings starting to pile up after the repayment period. So here in Saskatchewan, There has been some work done. Pamela did some work in 2005 looking at what the legislation had to say around local improvement charges. And they found that there are actually no specific barriers in any of the acts, in the Northern Municipalities Act, the Rural Municipalities Act, the Urban Municipalities Act, or the Local Improvements Act. So nothing that says you can't do it. There's nothing that says you can do it either, and that might be a helpful thing. In any case, the projects would have to be approved by the Saskatchewan Municipal Board, so you would want the Saskatchewan Municipal Board to think this is a good idea. And the path forward may be a clarification requested by a municipality that's interested in pursuing the idea, or through SUMA, or through SARM. But there's certainly some possibility. And an interesting thing to note about Saskatchewan, and what we did in our report, was have a look at what percentage of greenhouse gas emissions in each province were as a result of space heating, space cooling, or heating, or hot water. And in Saskatchewan, it's about 13% of your greenhouse gas emissions. So there's considerable savings here from a greenhouse gas perspective. Now, there are some things happening around Canada. It's a new idea in Canada, but there are some things that are starting to lead the way. So Vancouver just announced a pilot project last spring using a form of local improvement charge financing. And they are just beginning to start to take the applications now. Their goal is to retrofit 500 houses. It's going to be self-financing. They had to do a little bit creative because the province wasn't willing to take out the delinking. They weren't willing to say that yes, you can carry this over from homeowner to homeowner. So if a homeowner goes on the program now and sells the house, they have to pay that loan off before it doesn't transfer over. So the province wasn't willing to make that change yet, and so the city had to go and get some other backing. So they have got a reserve fund. They're working with Van City, the credit union, and the credit union is providing the loans. But the city has had to backstop just in case in the extreme event of defaults. The city has put in $500,000, and they had to go to find a private foundation to put in another $1 million. So $1.5 million is backstopping those loans that Van City is making to homeowners. Now, the city has got their money collecting interest, and they're expecting that they're not going to have to spend any of it on defaults because the default rates are so low. But that's what they've had to do to get the program off the ground. And it's a big, ambitious one. It could lead the way for other municipalities and cities in the country, so we're really excited to see that. And it's being paid back on the municipal tax bill. Here's another really one. This is really exciting. The Halifax Solar Community Initiative. In this case, this is the first jurisdiction in Canada where they have made that change to local improvement charge legislation. There's a change in the Halifax Charter. And so Halifax is launching on a hugely ambitious installation of solar hot water heating. And it's going to be financed through the local improvement charge mechanism and payback through the property tax bills of participants. Here's what they're looking at. Creating 300 jobs, saving $3 million in energy savings. They're targeting repayment to cost less than annual energy savings. This was really the big talk in the halls in the conference I just went to this week, because they put out a call for applications, and they got 1,600 applications in the first few weeks, and they've had to stop taking applications. So it looks like there's going to be no problem with take-up on this. Again, a very, very exciting model, because it's the first one in Canada where they've been able to use the local improvement charge mechanism. Payback is expected 5 to 10 years. Ottawa is also looking at this. Ottawa Community Energy. Again, Ontario needs to make some changes, but Ottawa is looking at what's the possibility here. Again, using the property tax mechanism as the way of collecting back the loans. So there's lots afoot. There's A proven model that we've seen happen south of the border, and if you look in our paper, we've got 3 case studies that go through in some detail. There's lots of interest across the country. There are some municipal leaders in the country who are leading the way that you might be able to work with and point to. And it offers such a possibility, a combination of comfort for homeowners and savings in energy and savings in greenhouse gas emissions. So here we are. It's a proven model with a good repayment track record. It's voluntary. It doesn't impact people's tax bills. It's a voluntary program. It's not subsidized by the residents. Not any tax. Not a risk to the public purse. The default rate has been proven to be very low. And municipalities who are in the lead here can reduce energy bills and save homeowners money. They can create good local jobs and encourage local spending. One of the interesting parts about the Babylon story that I told you about earlier, on their website they talk about how there's an additional $682,000 local dollars circulating in the economy as a result of their program. And excitingly also be a fast and affordable way to take action on climate change. And that's an area where it might be kind of nice to have something some action you can take. So in summary, here you are. Upscale climate action quickly, stimulate the local economy, grow jobs, help residents pay less, live more comfortably, drop community greenhouse gas emissions, address the gap between federal and provincial programs. And this is the name of our paper, and that's where you can access it, www.civicgovernance.ca. All that we need now is a little bit of a climate to help clarify that little mechanism about local improvement charges. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
I've heard about using local improvement charges before, but my one question about it seems like a really good idea. When the next person buys the house, what they buy is a house that's more efficient, but also has slightly higher property taxes. With the, has there been any resistance to that?
We haven't heard that response yet, probably because it hasn't been a program that's been around a long time. And interestingly enough, I did hear that response. That was raised yesterday in a workshop where we were doing this kind of a discussion. And that is something that municipalities or the assessment authority might want to take into account if they're wanting to encourage uptake on the retrofit front. Certainly the people who are buying the house are buying a house that has added value to it because it is going to be more energy efficient. And if they are buying halfway through the cycle, there's going to be a point when the loan is paid off and they're going to reap the benefits of having to pay out fewer dollars for their energy. So in a way they're getting it's value for money.
I don't know, maybe that might add to the question, I'm not sure, but usually what happens with a lien, I'm not a lawyer, but if you have a lien, the lien needs to be released prior to being able to execute the sale. Therefore, I would assume that at the time of the sale, that lien would need to be paid off in order to clear it, right? So that means that the new purchasers would not have this, would have to be cleared off before sale, right?
Yes and no. That's the case in Vancouver, but they're trying to get the change in the provincial legislation so that it carries over, so that when people buy the house, they just take it up. And that's because they don't want, they'd like the loan to stay with the house and not with the homeowner, because in some cases it might be harder for that homeowner to get the loan, and it adds to the homeowner's sort of profile, of our credit profile, if you will, and that's one of the reasons why they're trying to get it switched. It's the way that it works in Portland and in Babylon, is just that seamless switch over.
Can they use a caveat instead of?
I don't know, that's a good question. Maybe. Go ahead.
I guess not to pass the buck, but I think in this is a really important initiative, and it seems to me, given that Saskatchewan has a Crown Corporation natural monopoly on the utilities, is involved in providing low-interest loans for specifically this kind of objective. And because we have a large rural population that should be part of this strategy, it seems to me that we, as a coalition of municipalities, might want to urge this as a solution province-wide, because SaskPower, you know, it's a direct trade-off, exactly because the statistic on reducing the cost of expanding electricity, we know there's still increasing demand on electricity. This would be a very strong provincial strategy in a much shorter time period, and especially if municipalities would buy in and support it. But in terms of the administration of this, I think it should be provincial.
Well, and I think that's a really good point. So local improvement charges are on-bill financing, and you're talking about on-bill financing. I think in provinces like this where there is a Crown Corporation, that's a really, really good route to go.
And SUMA, it could be through SUMA to help liaison with the province, put that in.
Yes, it could. That might be something that you might want to consider. I wouldn't rule out the idea of at least enabling the local improvement charge mechanism as well, in case there is a municipality that wants to take a more direct approach, or maybe wants to look at renewables as well as retrofitting. But I think probably practically, that's a very astute observation.
The problem is that doesn't address the keeping it with the house rather than the homeowner.
Good. Then maybe that's something to look at.
Financing.
That might be something to look at, and it might be interesting to see what's happening with the on-bill financing legislation in British Columbia. I'm not certain what they're planning to do there because they're doing the regulations now, but I expect that might be one of the discussions that happens there. Whether or not it can stay with the house that has the bill.
Actually, my question, that was an aside. My question was, do you get sort of an EnerGuide rating with this then? That comes with the house for the...
Well, that's another related kind of initiative, because there's a big push for having a sort of an EnerGuide rating that makes it easier for people to know whether or not they're getting an energy efficient house. And so I've heard lots of people proposing that as a good idea. And certainly having the base of EnerCan to do the audits and to provide some sort of systemic approach might be a thing to build on. But certainly beginning to hear lots of people advocating for that as well.
The $7,000 number you're using, what did he assume is included in the retrofits?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry if I missed that slide. So the retrofits, generally speaking, are all the ordinary things that you would expect. So it might be furnace, it might be weatherization, it might be windows, it might be insulation. Just all kind of an ordinary list. And that is not from deep retrofits. If you do a sort of a deeper level of retrofits, you could expect more savings than that. But those that you would expect in a typical program, that's what it's based on. That was from, I forgot now, I think an EnerCan study, that particular number. Anything else?
I was going to ask about the Halifax initiative that you mentioned, where they had 1,600 applications for 600 to 700 spots. We heard about programs yesterday around affordable housing initiatives where municipalities were having trouble getting applications for those programs. Yeah. So I'm just wondering if you know what Halifax did to promote it. It's a
very, very interesting thing. There's a really heavy culture of conservation in that province. Because the energy is so expensive. Well, it's coal-fired like it is in Saskatchewan. Very expensive. And they had, the Crown had done an analysis based on cost to see, you know, would it be less expensive to retrofit or to build a new plant, and it's actually more expensive to build a new plant, so there's a heavy emphasis on conservation. So there have been a number of initiatives already, sort of energy conservation initiatives in the province. And there's been a lot of buzz about this particular initiative, and so people know about it really. It's a high level of awareness, and people are jumping onto it.
Wasn't that a provincial thing? Efficiency Nova Scotia?
Yes, it was a provincial thing, and it was a very interesting process they went through because they did a very intensive citizen engagement discussion with the people of Nova Scotia about what the best way was to manage things. And out of that process, when they established Efficiency Nova Scotia, they decided that it had to be independent because Efficiency New Brunswick next door isn't, and occasionally the government of the day siphons off some of the money for very good reasons, but siphons off some of the money. So Efficiency Nova Scotia is actually an independent organization that keeps the percentage of funds that are collected on the energy bill, especially for retrofit.
But it's not just Halifax, right?
Halifax, this particular one, Solar Halifax is just Halifax. There are two different kinds of initiatives. So this one is an amendment to the charter, the Halifax Charter, to allow them to do it. They're actually partnering with the Green Municipal Fund, which is a fund that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has, that the federal government gave them from gas taxes. And so the Green Municipal Fund is helping them with this because they have an interest in improving the model. Anyone else?
Do you think the reluctance to take some of this up might be just lack of information? Because I found that slide that you showed that was very powerful and simple. You know, that you get your savings back and everything's paid off. And then if you had that rating, you have a much more marketable house. You know, if everybody wants that solid rating for the house.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's one of the challenges, I think, is awareness levels for people taking up those kinds of initiatives. They're not having a problem in Babylon because, again, there's such buzz and it's so high profile, and they're not in Halifax. But there's another really interesting initiative in Colwood, British Columbia, where they are a little bit worried about the take-up. And this, again, was a municipal leadership story. A councillor went to a federal fund for energy innovation and managed to persuade some heavy grant funding for the installation of solar hot water panels. They got enough funding really to basically retrofit 2,000 of their 8,000 houses.
Did you say grant funding?
Yeah, they got some big money from the innovation fund, again, because they were trying to prove the model. So what Colwood has done is establish an office in Municipal Hall to make it easy for people when they come in to make the application. So they sit down with them and help them with all the grant applications. There's a provincial granting program that helps as well. And in order to qualify for the solar panel, you have to have an energy audit done for your house. So you get all of the other information about what else you could do in your house in order to make it energy efficient. Part of the initiative, they're actually getting a lot more take-up on the heat pumps, which is part of the offer, than they are on the solar panels. But one of the things they're trying to do with their project is they're trying to see if they can create some buzz to make it the cool thing to do on the block. So they're actually partnering with the local university to see if they can try and track that a little to try and speed up the uptake on the applications. But my understanding is they're a bit slow still in the uptake.
Solar is a much tougher sell in BC where you don't see the sun for a month sometimes.
Well, again, I was talking to somebody who does solar installation yesterday who said, yes, but you have to realize you could put solar on all 4 sides of the house, and even the side that doesn't get the sun, you still get 40% energy. So there you go. Yeah, it does rain a lot in BC. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question then, actually, when you really look at it at the program as a whole, when trying to, holistically look at reducing the greenhouse gases and everything else, that would probably mean that you'd say, well, let's try to raise the bar overall. That would mean then you probably have to establish some form of targets to say, well, if you're going to apply for the program, yeah, okay, you might change the bathroom window. Oh, think about all the energy. You might say, well, now at bar, you say, well, no, really, yeah, you could do your blower door test, your before, your after, just like the InterGuide program did, to determine just exactly how well you've succeeded. But somehow along the line, to try to achieve that goal, there should be some form of a target. Say, you want to get into the program without making it too restrictive. We get into the program to say, but you know what, we really want you to achieve an InterGuide rating of 80 or 75 or something to try to at least, you know, raise the bar somewhere. So, I mean, it's wonderful that Nova Scotia is coming up with a solar panel thing. But number one is plug up all your holes first. And the InterGuide program hasn't gone out there and filled all the holes in all the houses everywhere we've gone so far. And that's the most effective, most cost-effective approach of being able to already try to achieve those targets rather than putting a bunch of solar panels on them.
Well, I think the exciting thing about Nova Scotia is actually for us is using the local improvement charge mechanism, because it's the first example in Canada. And that's what we found exciting about it, was to be able to pay back, raise money through local improvement charges and pay back on your tax bill. It's backstopped by the Green Municipal Fund, but it's an idea of innovative financing to be able to get people to go ahead and do those retrofits in the first place. But that's an interesting kind of observation around standards and targets. There are lots of municipalities that are looking at greenhouse gas reduction targets. In British Columbia, because of the provincial legislation, we have a carbon tax in British Columbia. And in order for municipalities to get their carbon tax money back, they've had to sign up for the Climate Action Charter. And that means that they commit to carbon neutrality for their operations, for their own municipal operations, which are about 3% of the community-wide emissions. So there's a lot of sort of dialogue around targets and communities having targets to try and reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. They also, in British Columbia, have to have a community-wide target in the official community plan. So there's lots of development happening because driven by that provincial legislation. Any other questions? Yeah?
For some people may know this already or not, but in Saskatchewan here, we still have the Saskatchewan InterGuide for Houses program, which is the same thing that the federal government had with the Eco Energy program that they had just canceled. The Saskatchewan program has been operating in conjunction with Natural Resources Canada for a number of years, and Saskatchewan never got out of offering that program. So there are still rebates available to homeowners in Saskatchewan that want to do an energy audit of their home and do the improvements and accept the rebates. The benefit of this program also includes Natural Resources Canada's evaluation of your home. So the auditors would provide that information back to Natural Resources Canada. They would rate your home on that scale of 0 to 100 and provide that information to you. And so you do have that rating on your home, even though currently the federal government isn't providing additional rebate funding for any of the retrofits.
So there's still a rebate mechanism to work with. So if you had a municipality that was acting on a local improvement charge loan, probably your office would hook that person up with the rebate, so they'd have to borrow less in order to do the whole thing.
It should be noted that that has an end date too, as of October 2013, as of the moment.
Yes, that program, the past offering of that program by the provincial government started April 1st last year and goes to October 31st, 2013. But we have been offering that ourselves, SaskPower, Sask Energy, and the 3 energy evaluator companies that have been certified by Natural Resources Canada to provide that service in Saskatchewan have been operating since the federal government came out with that program at least 8 or 10 years ago.
Okay.
Well, I think that adds on to the point about provincial strategy, that we actually could be merging an existing program into something broader with municipal support. And you made a presentation to SUMA as well, didn't you? Or
I think we had some dialogue with some people who are involved in SUMA, but we would like to go and make that presentation.
Okay, I thought you were at the convention.
We were, but we didn't get a chance to speak about the idea. However, who knows, another time. But that would be a really natural alliance, a natural way of advancing that kind of approach.
Have you ever dealt with any communities who made those audit numbers public? Like if I was going to buy a house, I could find that out?
know? That's a good question. I wouldn't be surprised if that exists somewhere. Does anyone know about that? You?
No, I don't know, but it's just a comment I'd like to make too, just kind of related to that, is that I think something that would really advance that is for the real estate agents to take some ownership. And I think the EnerGuide should be on the MLS listing, should be made part of that.
They looked at that. It's really difficult though, because there's nowhere near enough certified energy advisors to do that.
But
if they have to grandfather it in.
But even just to put it on there, so that if I'm searching for a house and
yeah, but you have to have somebody model it to get that EnerGuide number, right? You need a certified energy advisor, and to do that, they got to either a blueprint or go in the house, and there's a lot to come up with that number. You can't just slap a number on it. So
there might
there's
be
very few amount of people that can do it.
Yeah.
those that have it done though.
Those that have it done have to show up.
On MLS, if
Okay.
it's possible. I think that would really advance.
It's an interesting idea. It also points the way to maybe some training for a new job opportunity in energy auditing.
Oh, yeah. Start business tomorrow.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I missed you.
What about the issue of air quality in these condos and houses that are so heavily insulated?
We haven't looked at that in our paper. Is there something you want to add to the assembly about that?
More about it, so I was just wondering, like to me, like for $7,000, you could, for $4,000 you could get a gorgeous little wind turbine. I think that makes a lot of sense, like just getting a wind turbine for your backyard or solar.
And that's really interesting because maybe that is like an addition to the program that you could consider is adding the renewables as well as to the conservation.
Yeah, rather than going really far in one direction, go in the middle, I think would make more sense.
And just also to remember on the conservation piece, that quote that I showed you earlier about the cleanest, maybe I didn't actually give it to you, the cleanest energy being the energy you don't use as well. That there's still a case for both of those things. I think renewables and conservation.
And there are lots of companies too now that are emerging that are making wind and solar panels out of recycled materials like the PopCan Solar Company, for example. So that's really that creates
be great.
Jobs too, which is really
That's great. That's great. All right.
Did you have enough? Well, thank you, Charlie, for an opening or a broadening of a discussion on a sort of program direction that's otherwise being evolved out of provincially and federally, that we might actually recharge a bit, and partnership between municipalities and the province makes a lot of sense on this, and I think those of us who are here should be.
Glad to hear that.
Our SUMA board member isn't here today, but I'll be talking to her. So.
Okay. And again, we have copies of the paper.
And the evaluation, you wanted a reminder about that, or anything else? Good, Jan?
Just thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you. Evaluation forms for people that come in late are on the table, so which is to raise issues and suggestions about future conferences, so very important.
Yeah, and just a programming note here in terms of we're going to reconvene in about 18 minutes. And we've got Eric Fenner-DeWall speaking. He's going to be speaking on behalf of the Bear Eco Home that was produced up in Saskatoon. So it's a Saskatchewan story here. Ron LePage was unable to make it, so he's engaged Eric to do a presentation on that home. And then that'll be 45 minutes, leads us to 3 o'clock, where Raylyn and Troy Tilbury will be doing their design charrette for a high-performance home design. And as well, Jeffrey Waters will be here from the Gold Green unit from 3 to 4:30. So there'll be concurrent sessions there from 3 to 4:30. So again, we come back in 15 minutes. We still have lots of muffins and hot coffee, and so thanks very much.
Yeah, muffins. A ton of muffins.
A ton
if you don't eat more muffins, they're going to end up in the food bank for a week.
So thanks very much for coming. See you in 15.
The documents that some people got, the executive summary, is just a short version of the paper, but there is a full version on the website, and we do have a few copies available here of the full version. So come on up and go.
start our 2:15 session here, running a few minutes over. So again, thanks to everyone coming out, and this session is going to deal with the Saskatchewan story, and Eric Penner-DeWall is going to be coming up here shortly, and he's going to be talking about the MJEAC home. That is a homegrown story and something that our province is proud about. So Eric, without further ado, come on up.
I was clapping. Clapping is really good for my ego, I gotta tell you. Clapping is great. Before we get started, I just wanted to point out that I really appreciate the eco-sensibility of SciAst, because recently I discovered that SciAst actually has the thinnest toilet paper I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's really remarkable, and if you haven't checked it out, it would be really good just to take it and hold it up to the light, because that's really the way you can actually tell. It's really cool. I'm going to just hold this a little bit. So the MJEAC home is not my thing. The MJEAC home was pioneered and developed by a guy by the name of Ron LePage, who is a former Deloitte partner, and then suddenly just decided that he liked science and wanted to build houses and dove headlong into it. And this has been his project for quite some time now. He couldn't be here because, being a former Deloitte partner, he's probably laying on the beach in Hawaii right now, and couldn't be here. But he asked if I would come and present the home for him, because we're the ones who built them in southern Saskatchewan. When I say build them, I mean we're about to build our first one. So that's what I mean by that. So the MJEAC home, basically MJEAC Homes is a company, and decided that they wanted to build a net zero home. And for those of you who don't know what net zero is, basically the home would actually produce as much or more energy than it consumes. Okay, so it's actually not taking any energy from anywhere else. So, sorry, SaskPower, well, they actually don't want you to use their energy.
You just need to clarify that that's probably on the basis of an annual basis, right?
Yes, annually. Yes, sorry, thank you. Yeah, annually. So we're talking like on an annual basis, it produces more energy than it consumes. Now, in January, it might take a little more in that month, but eventually it will produce more than it consumes. So no power from SaskPower, no gas from Sask Energy. It's doing what it's doing by the end of the year. So basically, the design team. I don't know. Anybody heard of Rob Dumont here? Dr. Dumont, yeah. Yeah, he's fairly kind of famous-ish. And he's kind of a god. Like, if you're actually in his presence, he glows a little bit, and there's these angels that sing. It's very weird. Dr. Dumont's brilliant. He's kind of the leader in sustainability in Saskatchewan, and he's been around for a long time. So he headed up the design team for this home, and had a bunch of other people working with him. The whole goal for this was 66% less water usage, 75% less waste, high indoor air quality, and a cost of, this blows my mind, $120 a square foot. Now, built as an RTM, so we're talking about a home that's built on skids that's ready to be moved. So, ready to be moved RTM. It's very, very clever. Lifestyle was also very important to them. They wanted to have be able to incorporate a pleasant lifestyle as well. So, what is a green home? Well, some of you guys might recognize this. The one in the top right is actually the Saskatchewan Conservation House, which was built in the 70s, and that is kind of an icon. Actually, that home was built 40 years ago, and it is still at least twice as efficient, if not more, than your typical new home today. Funny thing though, the people who live in it now, I recently heard a story, someone went and knocked on the door and said, "Oh my God, do you realize what house you're living in?" And they were like, "What are you talking about?" We know it's kind of weird, but you know, what are you talking about? And then they had to explain the story about it. So, kind of a weird thing there. The home on the left is actually Dr. Dumont's own house, and built in a similar style as the MJEAC home was built. And then the one on the bottom is the Factor 9 house in Regina, which is also really fascinating as well. So things to keep in mind: energy and resource efficiency, health and safety, durability, which is often something people don't think of when you think of a green home, is having something that is actually going to be durable. Really important. I think actually, Trevor, you mentioned that yesterday, which was really good. Supports a sustainable community, and actually 87% of home buyers who end up being more satisfied with their green home than their previous not green home. So those are the kind of three precedences that have been set. So in talking about different rating systems and different sorts of ways to measure homes, in the last probably 10 or 15 years even, we've seen kind of an explosion in different types of rating systems. You know, you've got Living Building Challenge, you've got LEED, and you've got all these different things that are coming out. And it gets a little bit hard to navigate. So just really quick, LEED for Homes is basically a certification system. Now, it's a point-based system. It's extremely complicated. It's also very effective. And when you're actually done, you get like a certification. So you actually get like this plaque on your wall, and you're like, you achieved this because you're this cool. That's what that does. EnerGuide for Homes is a little bit different. EnerGuide is more like the way you grade something. Okay, so if I have an EnerGuide house, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good house, because it could have a really poor rating. Okay, so you can have like a 0 EnerGuide house, or you can have a 100. And 100 would be called net zero. So think of a report card. You know, there's like the reporting part. Like, can your teacher fills it out? Do they still do report cards? Does that happen? You still get like numbers in college? Does that happen? Yeah, it happens. Okay, I don't know. I've been out for a little while. You know, I don't know. So the actual report card and the way they grade everything, that's EnerGuide for a house, and then the certification is actually LEED or another certification process. There's a lot of them. So they all use, like, EnerGuide is a good way to rate homes and to just rate how effective they actually are. So we've got two kind of examples here. The one on the bottom right, that's the Equilibrium House in Edmonton, and then that's a tent. Not all that efficient. So this is LEED, and this, because of time constraints, I'm not going to go really into LEED because it's really complicated. But the U.S. Green Building Council came up with it as their rating system, among others. But you can get, like, you'll hear this in the news more and more as time goes on. You'll be like, it's a LEED certified building. In some cases, it's advertised that it's a LEED building, and it's actually not. And then the lawsuits break out, and people fight, and it's really cool to see hippies fight. It's fun. So, why would we build green? And it's not, I mean, it kind of seems self-explanatory because we're all here, and we're like, well, because we like the color. But we all know we want to save the planet and do good. But there's other reasons. Saving energy, lifestyle, protect the environment, affordability, and just quality of life in general is raised substantially. And also, I think what really, the biggest example that the Verico home did for me is that it really was an example that you don't have to actually spend more money to get something that is green, right? You just got to think outside the box a little bit. So, over the past 40 years, these are Ron's calculations, and he's an accountant, so I had to sift through this, let me tell you. Over the past 40 years, energy costs have increased 6.25% annually. Which basically means that if an average home in last year, I think it was in 2010, the average heating cost for a home is $3,340. So at an annual compound interest, or an annual compound increase of 6.25%, that becomes, in 50 years, so we're talking about 2062, in 1 year it would cost $69,200 to heat your home. So what is the rate of inflation right now? Does anybody know? What are we, 2%? I think we're around 2%, right? So 6.25% and inflation at 2%, I don't know. It's not looking good. It's not looking good. And there's undeniable evidence that there's significant changes in our climate. And, well, you can get in debates with people about this. I'm not going to. But, and I kind of was really interested in Ron's choice of magazine, Maclean's. But yeah, I mean, I think this winter is actually a really good example of climate changing and things doing things that are just, it's not normal. I mean, who's been in Saskatchewan the longest in this room? No, man, you have not. In the back, how long have you been in Saskatchewan?
Quite a while.
Oh, so you're not going to actually release that information, are you? Have you ever seen a winter like this?
Not quite, but I've seen when you get mud on your boots for changing tires at Christmas.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a weird thing going on, and I mean, it goes both ways, right? We're having a really weird winter this winter. Last winter was also a very weird winter, so we're starting to see these kind of fluctuations, and it's kind of hard to deny that we're seeing this. So this is the Conference Board of Canada, and as we started looking at the different types of energy uses and per capita greenhouse gases in the world, it started to get a little bit looking kind of bad. The average African produces less than 1 ton of greenhouse gas emissions a year, whereas Saskatchewan, well, we produce 72. So we're actually some of the worst in the world for greenhouse gas emissions, which is, I think you guys had a greenhouse gas emissions talk just before this, yeah? And it just kind of blows my mind, because I think of myself as a pretty good hippie, but it turns out that perhaps I'm not. And what really bothers me, actually I'm just going to go back here, you know, what bothers me is this, right here. It's hard to see, but this actually says US and then Canada.
Yeah.
Americans produce less greenhouse gas emissions than we do? No, that cannot be. But it is, per capita. So that's a problem, because I just hate being worse than them. That's really bad. And then this is actually Australia, which is the worst. And I'm not sure why they're quite so bad, because they have to ship everything there. It's an island, I don't know. I made that up, by the way, don't repeat that.
Jan, can you kill the lights? Kill the lights? Yeah.
Is it hard to see? You guys having a tough time seeing this? That says 72.
We can't see the US.
So this is the back of the Verica home. Now, it was at the Western Development Museum, thank you, in Saskatoon for a year. This was actually the back of the house, yet it faced the museum, and it's where you entered and left from the tours. And so a lot of people were like, oh my God, I'm not going to live in that, because it looks different. However, it is actually the back of the home. So typically, and obviously the reason they had to put it there is because that's where the Western Development Museum was, and they had to face it south because the solar panels really suck when you face them north. I hate to bring it to you, they have yet to develop that technology. So the actual front of the house was the very first slide, and it looks quite a bit better. But this is the back of the house, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the design and what was put into it. So here's an assessment of the energy usage of a typical home. So up here, we've got space heating. Up here we've got domestic hot water. Right here we've got lights, appliances, and mechanical. We've got HRV here, and so these are all the totals. And so down at the bottom it's about 40,000 kilowatt hours. So it's a very difficult thing to actually project this, and I think Trevor really hit on this good yesterday if you managed to hit his seminar, in that you really, you can look at the labels on all your appliances, but humans don't come with labels, and we should tattoo them on them when they're born, based on their performance and how they actually do things. But a lot of people, you know, might have 2 hair dryers, or who knows, people do weird things. So it's hard to judge that. So, but this was an estimation done on a basic house. So built to standard code, this home would require approximately 40,000 kilowatt hours of energy every year. So pay attention to a number of things that will affect the design. Space heating requirements vary significantly from month to month, and this is kind of what we were talking about being net zero. So space heating in the summer is obviously going to be a lot less, whereas in January it's going to be a lot more. And really, this is it's a tall order to get to net zero in Saskatchewan. If I was living in LA, it's a little bit easier to do, right? Because they don't have these ridiculously cold winters. However, us here, to get to net zero is a pretty tough thing to do. It's not an easy thing to actually accomplish. So the domestic hot water and the lights, appliances, and mechanical varies a little from month to month. Expected that the water usage is going to be similar in the summer as in the winter. And we'll come back to this a little bit later. So the high total consumption for the month of January is 6,800, about 6,000 for space heating, and then the lights and appliances and mechanical included in that as well. So it's about 8 kilowatt hours per hour in the month of January is what it ends up actually coming together at. So this is a summary of the design strategy. And start looking at energy consumption in each of the 3 areas. So space heating, domestic hot water again, and then lights, appliances, and mechanical. So the space heating is 23,000, the domestic hot water is 8,000, the lights, appliances, and mechanical are 9,000. Now, I have to tell you, of course, I'm not the scientist, Ron is. I'm just the guy that's going to build it. But from what I can see here, the amount of energy that they're trying to bring it down is substantial. So they applied the old sustainability strategies of reduce, reuse, and replace. And after the reduce and reuse, they're left with a requirement of about 9,500. So what he means by reduce and reuse is basically changing the way that you use the energy. Okay, so we're not actually adding energy yet. We're just changing the way that we use it. So we're introducing things like phantom load circuits, and we're changing like low flow water heads and like shower heads and toilets, dual flush toilets, things like that. So we're just trying to bring our consumption down, which is stuff that anybody can really do. And then afterwards we see what we're actually left with having to produce still, how much energy we still need, and then we would actually buy alternative energy so that the house can become a power plant, basically. So you can pick a bunch of different types of renewable energy, right? Of course, we've learned from this weekend there's wind and there's active solar in the ways of, well, there's air as well, but there's also thermal and photovoltaics. And then there's, of course, hydro and things like that, which are a little bit less common. Okay, I'm not going to go into that specifically. Sorry, Ron. Okay, so the other thing that really came into this was a compact design. And they hired Blue Spot Consulting, and they came in and used a really compact design strategy. So the home was reduced from approximately 1,600 square feet to less than 1,300 square feet. And some of the ways that you do that is you try to see if you can actually combine activities in a room. So I don't know, my parents still live in this house in Chilliwack, and it's a fascinating thing. They've actually got this living room and this dining room that I've been in like 5 times. Does anybody have houses like this or seen a house like this? I don't know what the deal was. Like maybe it was a baby boomer generation thing, and they're very proud of it, and they're very proud that there's like furniture in there from 1972 and they won't replace it. But you know, those days are done. I'm sorry. We have to build those spaces. They cost materials. You got to heat those spaces. It's not really the brightest thing. Over here we've got an office. and it's kind of hard to see, but the office can also become a spare room as well. So it does dual duty. Other things like that. There's also just compact design with the bathrooms. You can see that they're very efficient. Bedroom space is efficient, and there's not really there's a dining room area and there's like a living room, but it's very multi-use space. You can use it for a lot of different things. Now, the other thing that they did was they kind of divided up the utility room a little bit and made utility closets. So this actually is the HRV here, and then the water heater's up here. So they've done a few different things to kind of make it a little bit different in that you don't have to have one big room for your utilities, but sometimes in space you have like these small little spaces. And an HRV is, you know, yay big. You can get into a little spot.
How many square feet?
It's 1,300.
1,300?
1,300, yeah.
Is there some way you can focus those pictures?
Yeah, they're no good, are they? You know what? This is the thing. Making up Mac and PCs go together is like eradicating racism. Right. And it's really hard. And so we had to use an RCA cable, and it has crappy resolution.
Do you mind reading out the titles?
Oh, of like what the rooms are? Okay, so we've got pantry here, kitchen here, stairs, HRV. Wow, that is bad. I can hardly see it here. That's, I believe, hot water. And then we've got, this is north, obviously. And then we've got master bedroom, walk-in closet, ensuite, office. Does that help at all? A little bit? Sorry, I apologize for the quality. Okay, so the alignment of the home, obviously really important to have it facing south. So it's just slightly off the east-west axis, and it provides enough maximum solar gain from the home. This is something that we kind of botched in this country when we started settling it. It just so happened that the longest distance across our country was from east to west, and so we needed to have some sort of transportation line, so we put this railroad in, and the railroad runs from east to west, which is great, but then when they developed the streets, they developed them perpendicular to the railroad, so they went north-south, and then the houses ended up, for the majority, facing that direction. However, that puts you at a huge disadvantage for collecting passive solar energy. Passive solar being not panels or not any sort of mechanical system, just like we're experiencing here, we have windows, the light comes in. So just by the way we settled the country, we're a little bit of a disadvantage, and then as time went on, now we're kind of going like, oh, maybe we should change things. Developers like to make things really cool. For those of you who are from Regina, they try to do something really neat with the East End, and they made this neat street called Quant Street, which is like a gauntlet, and it's suicide. So planning is a long way to go yet. And I'm not a city planner, but the city planners that I do know, they're people with enlarged heads because they actually have to be able to handle all that information. They don't really have large heads, please don't tell them I said that. So this is a model, a computer model of the Verico home. It's a SketchUp model, so it's just it's actually a free piece of software you can download off the internet, and you can design anything. And then you can tell the computer, what does this look like if I'm facing south on at 3:30 in the afternoon on December 15th, and it'll show you the shadows. So what you're seeing here is mid-December, and it's noon. Okay. Now what you want to be looking at here is the different shadows that are on the building. So keep an eye on that. And this is the same rendering showing the shade at about noon in the middle of June. So now you can see that these windows are all shaded. Can anybody tell me why this might be important?
Heat gain, maybe. In the summertime, the heat gain won't be as hot.
Right, right. So there's this really cool thing that the planet does, and the sun is low in the winter and it's high in the summer. So if we have just the right overhang on the Verico home, it happened to be 26 inches, that's what they used. And if you place that properly, just the fact that the sun is high in the sky in the summer, it will shade all your windows and obviously block the sun from getting into your house. We know what passive solar design does because we've all burnt ourselves on seat buckles, right? That's passive solar design. So the next time you burn yourself, thank the sun. So thank you, sun, we love you. So this is the inside of the Verico home. The Verico home was built with a 1¼ inch thick concrete slab, basically. They're actually concrete tiles that were pre-manufactured and they were mortared to the floor. So it was 1¼ inch thick of concrete over the entire floor. There were some issues with the floor. Well, there were some issues with the floor and there were more issues with the countertop. And the countertop ended up getting replaced. And I think they did some things with the floor to make it better. There was a subtrade issue and it didn't go as good as they wanted it to. However, it turned out pretty good in the end. And it does act as a really good thermal mass. So what happens is as the sun, of course, comes in the lights, this is basic passive solar design. For those of you that already know this, I'm so sorry. But the sun comes in the windows and it's beating on the thermal mass, the 1¼ inch thick floor. And the sun heats that up. So it spends all day heating that up and the floor gets hot. And then when the sun goes down, the floor is hot and the floor is like, oh man, I got all this energy, what am I going to do with it? And then it radiates back up into the house. And so that really affects how much heat you actually need to heat your home. And I've got a graph here that you need a PhD to decipher that will actually show you how much energy it saves. The tiles, they're almost 10,000 pounds. And so it's a lot of weight, so that has to be considered as well. So this is a super insulated building envelope. It's a double stud wall construction was the system they went with, 16 inches apart. This is the same system that Rob Dumont used in 1995. And he's a funny guy. He's a bit older, but his whole motto is just insulate. Like it's not that hard. I've got a PhD and I've been doing this for 30 years, but just insulate. So that's kind of his motto. So basically, he's looking for an R60 structure they went for. So they went for R60 walls, and they eliminated thermal bridging by having separate interior and exterior walls in the building envelope. So you've got an exterior wood wall, you've got an interior wood wall, and then you've got blown-in cellulose inside of it. And the roof actually had R100, which I think was the most insane number I'd ever heard. I couldn't believe that. I was like, R100. So that's 40 inches of blown-in cellulose. And then the floor, or the basement, sorry, walls will be R40, and then under the slab will be R20. This house was actually moved then to a cottage community, and then the basement was put in and done afterwards. Now, the air barrier, of course, being so critical because we've got 3 ways heat moves, right? Grade 9 science, here we go. Convection, conduction, radiation. So convection being the movement of air, so you lose heat by just air moving. Conduction is movement of heat through a solid object. So that's when you burn yourself when your seat buckle. And then radiation is the radiant heat, so that's like a greenhouse heat kind of thing. So you got to kind of deal with those. You got to think about all those when you're building. The air barrier, of course, inside that plastic vapor barrier that you're putting in, you're trying to stop that convection. So you're actually trying to encapsulate yourself in a balloon. So the average builder will take a hammer tacker. It's almost looks like a hammer, except it doesn't have a head on it. It has staples. They're really fun to use, and they're awesome when you hit yourself in the thumb. And they just hammer tack the vapor barrier on. But every time you put a staple through that, you're puncturing your vapor barrier. And not only that, but when you put drywall on, you also puncture your vapor barrier. So these are things you have to really carefully consider when you're going for a super efficient home. It's not just how much insulation you have in the wall, but it's sealing the actual air from getting out. And in really awkward spots, the Verico home was designed so they didn't have too many of the awkward spots, but in really awkward spots, like in your existing homes, where your floor joists run over top of your foundation wall and sit on top, you're losing tons of energy out there. I've heard like numbers like 30% of your energy goes out there. Spray foam insulation actually works really well because it seals and insulates at the same time, so you can kill all those holes right away. That was a rabbit. You should have a rabbit, you should throw it at me. So the goal for air changes per hour was 0.5 air changes per hour, which you should all be gasping right now. If we could just get a gasp from everybody, that would be really good. Thank you, thank you. That's insane. I've never seen it like that. I've never seen anybody attempt it. I don't know what Austria House, does anybody know what Austria House air changes per hour was in Vancouver for the Olympics? It was something insane like that, and they had no vapor barrier. Figure that out, that's another conversation. But that was the goal. So high quality windows and doors. Windows are obviously a significant energy loss. Unfortunately, windows are a giant hole in your building envelope. There's nothing you can do about that. So you can buy the best quality windows you possibly can, but in the end, like a ridiculously high efficient window would have an R value of like 7, and that it would be like unheard of. There are some experimental companies out there saying that they have R values of R20. I don't know if I believe it. So when you're talking about having a building envelope with walls that are R60, and then you've got a window with an R value of R5 or 6 or 7, it's a big hole. So you want to be very careful with the placement of your windows. And the way you do that is you can use shutters so that you can stop the sun from getting in or hold the heat in. Or you can use just even blinds. There's a company called Hunter Douglas, and they make a honeycomb wafer type of blind that comes down, and it actually has an R value of 1 or 2. So, which doesn't sound like much, but it's something. Also, placement of the windows. You'll notice on a lot of passive solar houses that there's very little windows, if any, on the north side. So you want to just keep windows not there because that's where you're going to lose most of your heat. And then minimal windows on the east and west, just so that you can kind of minimize that heat gain when the sun's coming in the west and just beating down. The south is kind of where you want the bulk of it. But you do have to be very careful with how much window you put in because you can overheat in a hurry. Okay, so heat recovery ventilator. These contraptions started getting used probably in a really big way about 10, I don't know, what's it say, 10 years ago about? They kind of, 10 or 15. I saw a 25-year-old HRV here a couple months ago. It was the funniest looking thing I've ever seen. Looked like a missile. So the technology's actually come a long way and they're becoming very efficient. Basic idea, you've got hot air inside your house or warm air, you paid the heat, and you want to get rid of the stale air because you're doing things in your house that are making it gross. If you've got teenagers, they're probably flatulating and you're cooking and showering and it just toxifies your air, so you want to get that out. So you take that air and you get it out of your house, but you got the heat in it, so then you're taking fresh air from outside and then you're putting the heat from your interior air into the exterior air, so you're getting fresh air, but you're saving the heat. That's the idea. There was someone said recently that they put, I think it was here, they said they put 2 HRVs in line, like in series. That was really cool.
Cam was saying they did it in Ontario somewhere.
Oh, Ontario, okay. So they've actually made the efficiency more by putting one in line with another. So it goes through one and then it goes through another one. I thought that was really swift. That was pretty cool. So the HRV does 4 air changes per day. So it changes all the air in the house 4 times a day. And yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Sorry, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm going to do it for time here. Okay. Energy Star dishwasher, Energy Star electric hot water heater, extremely efficient. We want to make sure that all of the appliances and everything, you can save quite a bit of energy if you just try and make your appliances Energy Star rated. They're actually going to be a little bit smaller than the ones in this slide, the hot water heater. They won't be quite that big, and there's going to be 2 of them, or there is 2 of them in the one home that's been done. Also, really basic things that you can do. Your hot water heater, just wrap it in insulation because you're going to lose heat out of it. So you just wrap it in more insulation and it holds the heat into the water heater more. Restricted shower heads. Regular shower heads can be as high as 10 to 15 liters per minute. Their shower heads in the Verico home are 5.2 liters per minute. and especially designed to create large drops. So it actually just mixes air within the drops and makes the drops bigger, so that when you hit them in the when they hit you in the face, you love it. That's important. I don't know why. We love our showers. So again, same thing with faucets. This is a drain water heat recovery. Now there's a lot of, I get in fights with my plumber about these things all the time. It's basically this copper tubing around a large copper pipe, and in the large copper pipe all of your drain water comes through, and it's hot water, and then you've got your cold water coming in here and going through this coil, so that the hot water, the way water works when it goes down a drain, it actually sticks to the outside of the pipe. So as it goes down, it's sticking to the outside, and because it's copper, it moves heat really well. So the cold water that's coming in the bottom is wrapped right around that, so it's getting preheated before it goes to the hot water heater. Saves you a little bit of energy. Works the best when it's underneath like a shower, because then you're continually getting rid of hot water as you're using new fresh water. So that's kind of the spot where it works the best. It works terrible when you have like, you brush your teeth. It's not awesome for that. LED lighting, so your electrical load can be hugely diminished just by using LED lighting. So like we're talking about replacing a 60 watt light with like a 13 watt light, I think. Maybe, is that right, Rodney? Where are you?
12.
What's that?
12.
12, thank you. So that's definitely a great way to go to reduce your energy load. Energy Star appliance, like I mentioned, the fridge as well. They purchased the most efficient fridge they possibly could. It was 540 kilowatts per year, which is pretty remarkable. So this is a picture of a phantom energy load, or phantom energy circuit. So basically, I think this was mentioned yesterday as well, on a power outlet you can actually split these, so that one's on one circuit, one's on the other circuit. So they actually split the plug, put this one on a different circuit, and this circuit they wired to a switch, and it has a little green dot on it. So the switch has a little green dot on it, so that all of your phantom loads, all of your TVs, and all of your stuff that's constantly drawing power is flicked here and shut off.
Yeah, just a question about those phantom loads, because we've looked at them as well. What loads do you put on there that you can turn off? Because I looked at doing it in ours too, and I really couldn't find much I would want to turn off, because everything's got menus in it, like you can't turn off your satellite box, there's all these things you can't really turn off. Or you gotta
Stop watching cable. It's burning your brain away. No, I'm just kidding. The stuff that I've put it on myself is I put my wireless internet on it, my router. Might put my TV on it. Any sort of power adapters that I have. Anything that has an AC adapter that runs on DC but needs to convert the AC to DC, you need to put that on it. I mean, I would also have the phantom load circuits. I think that they're on by room by room, so that when you don't hit one, it doesn't shut your whole house off, because there is a little bit of, you know, you don't want to shut everything off at once. And you know, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a be-all and end-all, but it definitely does help. And you just got to be choosy about what you want to put on and what you don't. I mean, it's about lifestyle, right? You're gonna, if you watch satellite TV every day and you got to reprogram it, you're probably not going to do that. Then I'm probably going to look for an Energy Star rated appliance if I can find it. So yeah, actually this technology, really cool. This is great. I was really excited to discover that. I thought that was really neat. This is important. This is monitoring. So in our cars we have a dashboard with a whole bunch of gauges, and it's really important that we watch what's going on. Same thing with a house. If you don't know how your house is performing, you're not actually going to change anything about it. So people who basically, statistically, if you just put a monitoring system in your house, people are 5 to 10% more efficient with how they use their house just by putting the monitoring system in there, because it's in their face, right? So it's really important to do. So we talked before about energy usage, and we got down to 9,500 kilowatt hours, but now we still actually need to produce that, right? Because otherwise we'd be plugged in and we still need to take that. So then they needed to decide what kind of renewable energy they were going to use. They went for solar. They bought photovoltaics up top here, and they've got the thermal panels here, and there's a couple more glass tube collectors here. So this is a great picture when you're looking at deciding what kind of, great map, what kind of renewable energy to go for. I was in another seminar with a guy from the Pembina Institute, and he said we live in the Saudi Arabia of solar energy, which is like right here, which makes a lot of sense. So that was a good choice for Verico. Okay, PhD, anybody? I'll try and run you through what this is showing very quickly. Basically, I'm going to come... Okay, so this is like January 18th, 19th, 20th. They were very cold days. Right up here between the 19th and the 20th, the blue line indicates the wind chill factor and the temperature, and this actually says minus 40. So we're talking about in the minus 42 range-ish here. Excuse me. The red bars represent total energy consumption for the Verico home for space heating, lights, and appliances. So there is no actual domestic hot water at this point because of the museum, they didn't have it hooked up. So you can see here where there's actually a ton of energy being used. Now, the biggest thing I want to point out here, and what all I'm really going to get into right now, is these red bars take a huge dip right here. And they do it on all 3 days. And that's because at this point, the sun is coming into the house at its most intense rate. So right here, the energy totally drops because it doesn't need to heat as much because of the passive solar design. So that's really good to take note of. Favorite spot in the house? The toilet consumes 60% less water. It's a dual flush toilet. And also a sink that's designed to require less water for washing. So this is a gray water recycling tank. It's basically water from the shower and the master bath will be filtered and reused in the dual flush toilets. So they do filter it and then they do it. You have to be careful with this because in Saskatchewan, most municipalities call this illegal yet. So what you do is you plumb it in first, you get your certificate of occupancy, and then you switch it over after. I never said that.
I think it's
Exactly how we did it.
I think it's just changed.
Oh, has it? Oh, really?
The plumber got a letter saying that.
Oh, that's exciting.
You can look at it now.
You can look at it, okay. Whereas before, if you actually opened a book that had gray water in it, they would show up in suits. Very scary. Rainwater capture. So they're looking to collect rainwater. Remarkably, over 1,300 square feet, if there's 1 inch of rain that falls on the roof of this house, you get 800 gallons. So it's pretty shocking, but when you have that kind of surface area and you're collecting that, you can get a ton of water. Now the design of the house too, the floor plan was also designed with basic construction material measurements in mind so that everything could be easily divisible. And what that caused to happen was that was the waste from building the floor. So, you know, if you've got a floor frame that's 17 foot 1.5, you know, you got a problem. Whereas if you have a floor that is 24 feet, three sheets of plywood fit perfectly on it. So that's kind of how they kept the design in mind. They used FSC certified lumber whenever they could. And they built in a continuous header, made the building stronger and reduced the number of cripples in the construction of the walls. So this is what's called an advanced framing technique, and it just reduces the amount of lumber that you actually need in the walls. And they also use 2-stud corners, of course. Bamboo flooring. Bamboo seems to be fairly popular. You do have to watch some of the splitting issues, but it seemed to work out really good in there. They glued it all. Worked really well. Kitchen cabinets, a bit of a story there. They were really excited to use kitchen cabinets, and so they called the kitchen supplier. And this is just a situation where people are not quite as educated as you need them to be. And they said, "Do you have bamboo kitchen cabinets?" And they said, "Yes, we do." And they said, "Oh my God, you have bamboo kitchen? Okay, we'll order them." So they ordered them. And the big thing about kitchen cabinets is that they're made usually with a particle board or an MDF, which has a high urea formaldehyde content in it, which off-gases into the house and hurts your indoor air quality. But when they found out they had bamboo cabinets, they were all over it. So they ordered them, they showed up, they installed them, Ron walked in and looked, and it was actually a very thin bamboo veneer over MDF. So, you know, you really got to watch. And the lady on the other line at the kitchen was like, "No, they're bamboo." She didn't know. Don't assume someone's the expert just because they tell you they are. You shouldn't believe me. So this is blown in cellulose. This is what it looks like. It's basically just recycled newspaper. It's also a carbon sink. So Ron estimates that the Verico home has over 5 tons of carbon embedded in the walls and ceiling. And a standing seam roof, which is a metal roof. Very long lasting, also recyclable at the end of its life. Hardy plank siding, durable, it's maintainable, so if it's damaged you can fix it, you can paint it, and supposedly it's also recyclable. So what? So why do all this? What's the point? Well, the energy is reduced by 40,000 kilowatts per year from a conventional home, so that's 2 million kilowatts over 50 years, and that's enough energy to power a 100-watt light bulb for 2,300 years, which is, by the way, a very long time in case you're wondering. Reduced greenhouse gas emissions by over 33 tons per year. Over 50 years, that is a greenhouse gas reduction of 1,650 tons. So pretty substantial. And we've already talked about energy savings a little bit, but just the design, the compact design overall reduces the square footage by saving you money on the square footage. then that means, you know, a savings of 40 to 60K with just with good design. No furnace, no air conditioning, so saves 15 grand. And just by incorporating good design, you can save money in other ways. Having a Murphy bed in your office, things like that. So compact design reduced material consumption by 15%. FSC lumber was used where it could be. Cellulose insulation made from recycled newspapers, and then the bamboo flooring. This is kind of a shocking one to me. The Verico home will reduce potable water consumption by 66%. For a family of 4, that's savings of nearly 800 liters per day. Okay, so this is where it gets crazy. In 50 years, that's a total of 14.6 million liters, which is enough potable water for the Greater Toronto Area for a day.
What?
Yep. That's what I said. It was just like that. It was, what? It was. The home was designed for a very efficient construction. The builder estimates that construction waste was reduced by 75%. And he also used recycled furniture to stage it for the tours and stuff like that. They also built in systems to support the residents in just living a more environmentally responsible life. So recycling, composting, of course the grey water that I mentioned, and the rainwater systems are a few of those. Indoor air quality. So indoor air quality is basically they use no-voc paints, low-voc sealants wherever possible. The HRV does 4 air changes per day, and also used high-end filters. So the Verico home that was the first one, and that was kind of built and it was put on display, and from there it kind of gained popularity, and it's kind of become a few different designs now. So the Verico Urban is designed for an urban application. It's designed to have an outdoor entrance to the basement for a revenue property, and it's also got an attached garage. So that's the guy up here, and this is the one that my company Walnut Construction is building in White City. And then there's also like a narrow lot version, and then there's also an executive and a cottage. So that brings me to the end. This is Ron's contact information here. You can also ask me if you have questions about it. Ron definitely has a wealth of knowledge about the science behind it, but I try and, you know, help you in any way that I can. Do we have any questions? I'll try and answer them as best as I can. I'm not sure if I can, but.
I noticed in all his designs, he's gone with a flat roof. What's the science behind that? Do you know why he's always going with a flat roof?
They wanted to go low because number one, it was an RTM, so they wanted to keep it low for power line issues. And then also, by keeping it low, they do have the one kind of steep spot just so that they can mount the panels on it. But basically, that was it. Less lumber goes into a really low roof, right? Yeah. So.
You mentioned no furnace, no air conditioner. What about backup heat?
It's electric heat, actually. Okay. Yeah. So there is an electric heat system in it that will kick in with the temperature. It's on a thermostat, and so whenever the temperature gets too low, it'll just kick in and just end it up.
Has there been a monitoring period for that electric heat to see how much it actually uses in a year? So data was from January of 2000.
Yeah. Now, what I'd say to that is yes, but yes and no. There has been a monitoring period, but while it was on display at the museum. What I'm interested in is the monitoring period as it's lived in. Yeah. That's what I would like to see. So it's still a bit of a mystery yet. Yeah.
You talked about rainwater collecting.
Yeah.
Is that common here? Like, I'm just trying to get an idea as to.
I think it's becoming more common. The thing with rainwater collecting that we have the issue with in our climate is that it freezes in the winter. Yeah. So you can put cisterns underground deep enough that it's protected from the frost, but it's expensive. And then you have to decide what you're going to do with that rainwater. And then you also have to have it so that if it fills out too much, it drains off into the sewer. So it is something that's done, but I would say right now, if you wanted to collect rainwater, it's pretty easy to go get a bin and put it underneath your downspout. That's a great way to collect rainwater. And you can just hook up a hose to the bottom, put a little hose bib on it, and you can water your grass or whatever you need to do with it.
There was, you showed a picture with a larger cistern there. Where do you get those?
That's just a water tank. Like, you can go to a PV Mart and buy a big water tank.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now that one's black, and I don't know for sure I don't know where the picture came from, but likely it's black so that the sun will beat on it and heat up the water for you. So you can actually preheat water that way. Water can it's kind of like a cheap solar
Actually,
thermal.
the other reason for that is so algae doesn't grow in it.
Yeah, good point.
A black tank or a blue tank won't get as much algae.
Well, and rainwater collection's come a long way too. There's now a system you can buy, and it comes in little flat pieces of plastic, and you put them together, and it's like milk crates. So you dig a big hole, and you put this plastic liner in, you put all these milk crates in the ground, and then you wrap the plastic liner around it, and then that's your water tank. So the water actually goes in there, and the plastic crates hold the ground up. It's like the structure. And then from there you can pump out and do whatever you want. But you can make any tank, any size, any shape, anything you want. And you can actually drive like vehicles on top of it and stuff. It's crazy. Yeah, really interesting things coming up. Anybody else? Any takers? Cool, well thanks, that was great. Appreciate it.